Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. I'm really excited today that you guys are tuning in. I have an awesome guest, and kind of the backstory with today's guest is pretty cool. We met at the downtown YMCA in Colorado Springs. I was working, as some of you know, it's my second part-time job, and I kind of just approached him and chatted with him for a few minutes. I think that was back in the fall, early winter, and this guest was down to get on the podcast. He's been traveling the world here recently, so today worked out really well for us to connect. So with that quick little snippet, I am going to introduce today's guest. Today's guest is a mountain runner, free spirit, beer connoisseur, tree hugger, perfectionist, and wanderlust. So today's guest is Peter Maksimow. Peter, I want to welcome you today to the 127 Fit podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. So I just want to start off today's podcast with kind of how you start your day. I know it probably changes up a little bit if you're stateside or if you're overseas, depending upon if you've got a race coming up. I know there's probably a lot of variabilities in there, but let's just say on a kind of an average normal day for Peter, if there is such a thing, kind of what does your morning look like? Is there a morning routine? Kind of what gets you jump started?
Well, it depends on if you're asking pre or post injury / surgery. Those are two different routines. When I was running, I'd usually get up, do the normal things, have coffee, have something to eat, and go for a run or do a workout or something to that effect. But I had surgery September 24th of 2018 for a defect in the articular cartilage of my knee, and that has changed everything. Okay. So my morning routine is getting up and then dreading the day because I can't run.
Right.
Dreading that I have to go out on the bike or get in the pool and do a workout, just because it's probably because of the injury that I dread those things so much. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't want to do them. Once I'm doing them, I think I'm fine, but there's always that, I have to go do this.
Right.
So, and I'm doing it because of the fitness aspect. I want to try to maintain fitness. So when I do get back to running, I'll be ready to go.
Okay, cool. Now, just you mentioning kind of like dreading kind of that rehab process and what you have to do outside of the running, that kind of just gave me a thought of, since you aren't able to run and do what you love, has there been kind of like a mental struggle, like maybe some sort of like type of, I don't want to use this word lightly, but maybe like some depression and just kind of fighting through not being able to be at that peak level that you're normally at as a professional runner?
Yes, I would say definitely.
Okay. Is that, so how have you handled that? I mean, is there maybe a spiritual aspect of things for you, or is it just kind of blocking out that noise? Is it meditation? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that I know, for myself, being a football athlete, when I was done playing college football, there was a time where it was very, very tough for me because I was known my whole life as an athlete. And I was on a team. I was in the locker room. I had something to kind of strive for and goals to set and all that. And then once that was all done, it felt like kind of like my life was done. And so I really had to work through that. So if you don't mind sharing, how have you worked through not being able to do what you love and being able to compete at that high level as a runner?
Well, I think that's an ongoing thing. Okay. I'm still working through that, and I wouldn't say I'm working through it very well because it's, I guess depression would be a word you can use. Mm-hmm. I'm sure everyone goes through it, so I'm not one to go and tell Instagram how depressed I am. Right. I don't think that's, to me, people say what's on Instagram is like just fake or part of your life that's good. And it's like, well, that's, if your part of your life's good, then I think that should be broadcasted rather than broadcasting the negative things, the depressing things, the things that get you down and tend to get other people down as well. They can be contagious.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I'm not dealing with it too well. I think there's other vices. Like, I think running is my vice. It's my pleasure. It's what I do for a living, essentially. But it's also a vice, and I think you lose one vice, you pick up another. And it's a positive vice.
Right.
So vices are probably they don't care what you do. They just some can be very negative, some can be very positive. Absolutely. But it's still an addiction, and I'd rather prefer the positive addictions rather than the negative ones.
For sure. Cool. So, yeah, no, I'm right with you, because I have called myself in the past a fitness junkie, and I know that if I'm not very careful, I can take, whether it's lifting weights, running, swimming, whatever I'm doing, I always take it to the extreme, because I love it so much, and I take it to that extreme where it becomes an addiction.
Yeah.
And I just know that as athletes, and I'm not a professional athlete, I'm just an average guy, but there's something about that fitness and those endorphins, and you get addicted to those endorphins that are being released, and then there's the notion out there of the runner's high, and and then once you get rewarded or recognition, or positive reinforcement through the exercise or through the running or the whatever type of training, fitness you're involved in, it just builds and builds, and then it's just like when you are like a junkie in the sense of some illegal drug or addicted to something, and that's taken away, like there's like a withdrawal.
Yeah. So physical, mental, everything.
Yeah. So I've been there on a lower level, and I just wanted. I'm glad that we're kind of talking about this, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate to where we're at, where we've been, because it's real. And I think it's one of those things within the fitness industry, within health and fitness, that is kind of brushed underneath the rug. I don't hear a lot of people talking about fitness addiction. You always hear exercise is good for us and eating healthy is good. And I know even for myself personally, like my eating has been something that I've really struggled with, because I take it to the extreme. I either don't eat enough, or I'll eat too much, or it's just it's hard. And those negative things within health and fitness and all of that just really aren't brought out, And when you're a professional athlete, and you're injured, it's like we don't really hear professional athletes talking about that mental struggle, that emotional struggle, and kind of the withdrawals. We always just kind of see the glitz and the glamour and the glory, and so thank you for sharing a little bit about that, because I think there's a lot of people that can relate.
Yeah, and like you said, being identified as a college football player, I've been identified as a runner a majority of my life. So to go from traveling the world and doing races and doing fairly well, being on U.S. teams, to pool running is in itself, just that thought is depressing to me. And that's what I've been doing in real life, not just in my head. But so I think I basically feel like I've lost my identity, and if I say that to someone, they're like, no, but you're a great person, you do this for the community. And so that helps me see outside of myself, not to just think of myself like, oh, if I'm not running, I'm nothing.
Right.
And it takes someone else to say, like, no, you've done this, or you've said something or done something that has motivated me. So that's good to hear. I'm glad that I get those responses, not just, and I think some athletes are just athletes, and they motivate through their athletic performances, and then if they're not doing anything else, if they're not helping out with a charity or Big Brothers Big Sisters or picking up trash on the weekends in their community, I don't think that's a well-rounded person. You know, maybe sometimes being the best athlete in the world means that that's all you do, and I think that's probably correct for Olympians. You know, if you're Michael Phelps and you're in the pool for 8 hours a day or whatever, however long he was in the pool, you don't have much time for anything else.
Right.
You know, you have to get in your 8,000 calories, and then you're probably exhausted and you have to sleep. So, but I think athletes, even saying something, their words can make a lot of difference.
Absolutely, yeah.
It can travel a long way. So, if there's athletes that just do one thing, you know, they do it well, they motivate through that, yeah, that's great, but you can always do more.
Cool. Yeah, being a well-rounded person is very valuable. So cool. All right, so let's kind of turn the page from that to just I want to touch on a couple of things that were in the introduction, which a couple of these things I pulled from your Instagram. A couple of them I just asked you before we started here the conversation if these words defined you, and you said yeah. So the first thing I kind of want to touch on is tree hugger.
Mm-hmm.
When I say those two words, in my mind, there's other words that pop up. There's something that I think about when I hear the two words tree hugger.
Like hippie?
But, hippie would be one. Yep, something in that direction. But I kind of want to hear on your end, as you this is something that you describe yourself as on your Instagram. So from your point of view, from your perspective, you describing yourself as a tree hugger, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means loving nature, being out there and doing something positive, because I think we as humans are pretty destructive with nature. Not on a whole, you know, but the ones that are doing the most damage are the ones that are have a lot of money or drilling and bear's ears or whatever it may be. So, yeah, I know words are pretty limiting, especially in an Instagram profile. And so I didn't even put commas or, connecting. I just wrote words in there. And I was like, well, it only limits me to however,
we got
150 characters or something. So I just said, all right, what defines me? And then took those few words and stuck them in there and left them open to interpretation. So to me, it means being a good steward of the land.
Cool.
I think that is very important because in my lifetime, I've seen some destructive things happen, and I think in the next 50 years, 100 years, it's just going to get worse if we don't try to solve that. And at this moment, especially here in the U.S., we're not. We're going backward again.
Yeah. So you brought up the word hippie. Is that something? Is that a word that you would consider a tree hugger as well? Are those kind of interchangeable, or
I think
not necessarily?
Yes, I would say. I mean, hippie back in the '60s is different than a hippie now. You know, you don't need to have dreadlocks and smell really bad and do a bunch of LSD.
Right.
But I think a hippie would be in tune with the earth and appreciate earth and not go and dump a bunch of trash.
Right.
They'd probably be the ones that picked up that trash. So yeah, I do think they're connected.
I love. No, it's great, man. I love.
Yeah, modern day hippie. I think it would be the best.
Yeah.
Descriptor.
And I moved out here about a year and a half ago. It'll be 2 years ago this coming July from Iowa, and so I moved out here to Colorado Springs, and there's definitely. I see kind of that hippie vibe in different pockets of the Colorado Springs area, and I think even outside of Colorado Springs, which is, I like it, you know what I mean? Because I've spent quite a bit of time in Southern California, and that's another place where it's kind of, you kind of got that hippie vibe, and it's different than like the good old Midwest where I come from. You know what I mean? Do you kind of
Yeah, well, I grew up in Southern California. I spent the first 21 years of my life there. Yeah.
Where at?
Just outside of L.A., a city called Whittier.
Okay, yep, I've heard of it, yeah.
And so I came to Colorado after college.
Okay, sweet.
For an internship at the Olympic Training Center here in the Springs. And yeah, after seeing these mountains, it was like, wow, this is amazing.
It is, yeah.
Every day you wake up and you look up at Pikes Peak, and it's all inspiring.
It's cool, yeah. And I'm trying to I want to move to actually. I would like to move to Yuma, Arizona. Okay. That's 2.5 hours because I don't want to ever see snow again. If I don't ever have to experience like 20-degree weather again, I'm cool with that, because I experienced enough of that, growing up in Iowa, going to college in South Dakota, and you still get some of that out here. But Yuma, sunshine, desert heat, love it, but it's 2.5 hours from San Diego, so that's 2.5 hours from the ocean. Like I said, I've spent a good amount of time in Southern California around the ocean. I mean, when you grow up like in the Midwest, I mean, there's some hills and that's about it. You know what I mean? But you come out here and you've got, the Rocky Mountains. You go to, East Coast, West Coast, whatever, and you're around the ocean. There's just something, it's unexplainable. I mean, the mountains and just like the certain parts of nature, when you're just out there, and I'm sure maybe this ties into your running and stuff, it's just, there's something that, again, it's just unexplainable. It's breathtaking, like waking up, looking, and there's Pikes Peak, like you said, or the mountains, or if you wake up and you can go walk on the sand, the ocean, it's just awesome, so that's cool.
I agree. So it sounds like you're basing your living lifestyle on the environment then.
There's aspects of that, for sure. Yeah, I mean, how I got out here was more on the spiritual end, but man, there's been because I grew up, lifting weights and have been in the bodybuilding scene and Venice Beach and the original Gold's Gym, Southern California. You see pictures of like Arnold and all these bodybuilders with their shirts off. There's been like this, affinity for that ever since I was a young kid. So I've always kind of been, and I was even thinking about going to college out in Southern California when I was, towards the end of high school. So there's always been kind of that pull to Southern California. And like I said, I've been out there enough. I don't think I can afford to live out in Southern California. So I was like, hey, let's get to like southwestern Arizona. We're close enough. So we'll see. That's kind of what's in my heart right now. But, life happens. We'll see. Colorado Springs, this whole area it's awesome too.
Yeah, well, I live in Manitou. I should say that. So that's a little different than Colorado Springs.
It is, yeah.
In a lot of aspects. That's where the hippies live, I say.
Yeah.
And the good music scene in Old Colorado City and Manitou, good food,
right,
great views,
great
trails, some of the best in the world, I would say. And I've been to a lot of amazing places that have trails. Run a lot of them. So I would say, well, there's a reason why some of the best mountain trail and ultra runners live right here in this area.
So Manitou, or what's the incline? The Manitou incline, right?
Yes.
Because that's like, I get on Instagram, I'll see obstacle course racers, UFC fighters, like top legit professional athletes, like, hey, top of the incline, hey, look at this. I mean, so
it's
for the listeners that maybe have heard about the incline or don't even know what it's about, why don't you just expound a little bit on that if you don't mind?
Yeah, so it's basically an old rail bed that climbs 2,000 feet in less than a mile, about 0.86 of a mile. That's what I get on my GPS every time I do it. And it was illegal until a few years ago. I think maybe 2011, 2012, it became legal.
Okay.
And before it was a checkerboard of private property. So part of it was owned by the Broadmoor, part of it was owned by the Cog Railway, Colorado Springs Utilities. So when you have those different areas of land that you have to cross, then they just say, no, we're not going to open this. It's too dangerous, too much of a liability.
Right.
So it's an intense workout. I know Joe Gray has run the fastest time that I would consider the fastest time. There's a few other out there that I don't think are legitimate, but he's run 17 minutes and 45 seconds on it. Allie McLaughlin, and she's the fastest woman on it, with 20 minutes and 7 seconds,
Wow.
right around there. So if you hear those times and you think they're slow, go out and do it,
Right.
and you will realize what world class performance is.
Now, what is the elevation increase of the incline?
I believe it starts, the base is probably around 6,300 feet, and then 2,000 vertical feet of gain. So I think it ends at 83 or so.
Yeah.
And yeah, they've done a lot of work on it the last couple of years. There's been a lot of money that has been donated to fix the incline, because I think there was a rock slide, and they in the early 90s maybe, and they just abandoned it. And there was no upkeep, so there was a lot of runoff. There was a lot of damage with the railroad ties. So they've, over time, and as they've gotten money, donated money, they have fixed it up.
Cool.
And, it's been closed for 6-8 months at a time. And
Right.
it's been a hit to Manitou Springs, because it brings a lot of people into Manitou.
Right, yeah.
A lot of traffic, a lot of congestion. Parking has always been an issue. It's an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
So it's quite the experience.
Yeah, because especially like summertime, really nice weather, springtime, fall, I'll get on my Instagram and I'm telling you, it's like every other professional athlete or, fitness guru, fitness person's like, hey, taking the selfies on the top of the incline,
Yeah.
And I haven't done it yet. Everybody's like, hey, Quentin, have you done the incline? I was like, no, I haven't yet. I got to do it just because it's kind of one of those things that you kind of got to do when you live out in this area. But
yeah,
it seems like it's a pretty legit training ground.
It has become has attracted a cult following.
Yeah, it's cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Sweet. So pre-injury, was the incline something that you kind of tackle every once in a while?
Every once in a while. I think it was a good addition to training. I would personally rather run.
Right.
There's sections of that. I'd probably have run, I would say 70, 80%, 60 to 75% of the trail when I've done it, the incline.
Cool.
Which is, you can't run much of it. When it gets steep, it's 63% grades at some point, and you don't realize what 63% is. When you can reach out and touch the railroad tie in front of you, or just bend down and touch it with your nose, that's steep.
Yeah.
So I've done it training for longer races. A friend of mine, Alex Nichols, and I did it. We do it multiple times when we were training for a race out in France called the Templier.
Cool.
Which was, we'd go out and do Cameron Cone, which is just to the left of it if you're looking at the skyline in Manitou Springs.
Okay.
And that gains probably 4,000 feet in a matter of 3.5, 4 miles.
Okay.
And then we'd come back down and finish with the incline, which was just, you don't realize how exhausted you are until you try to run uphill at that grade.
Right.
So run, or even slog, power hike, whatever you want to call it.
Cool.
So yeah, I did it intermittently. I'm not as addicted as some people are to it. But I guess my claim to fame on it is that I have the incline beer mile record.
Really?
I call it the world record because I don't know.
Okay, you gotta explain.
It sounds good.
What's you gotta dig a little bit deeper.
All right, so are you familiar with the beer mile on a track?
I am. Yep.
So it's 4 beers, 4 laps. Your time starts. You open a beer. You have to chug it, run a lap, repeat 3 more times. And on the incline, we made some general rules, but it was basically you carry your own beer. You drink at approximately every quarter mile. We used to have landmarks that you drink at. And drinking beer fast is, I think it's a waste of beer, and I don't like to do it. But it was a competition, so I do like to compete, so that trumps drinking beer fast.
Right.
And I've done it, I believe, 3 times. We had a group get together and do it just as a friendly thing. So I've done it. First time I did it was about 25 minutes and 42 seconds. And I may be off by a few seconds, but the last time I've done it, and I was really competing, I was doing it with a friend of mine, and he's like, I can't drink beer fast. Simon Gutierrez is his name. He's won the Pikes Peak Ascent several times. Okay. Been on a lot of U.S. mountain running teams, and then he started drinking beer fast. He can run. Right. He can run uphill fast, and I thought, I have some competition here. So that really pushed me. So I did it in 23 minutes and 42 seconds.
Wow.
So that's
so with the beer mile, I understand that, but when are you drinking the beer when you do the incline? Every
about quarter mile.
Oh,
but you're carrying it.
Okay, I got it.
You're packing it in, you're packing it out. We've never gone and set it on the railroad ties at every quarter mile. And again, it's not a full mile. Right. But it's a little more extreme than a mile.
Yeah, man, that sounds pretty gnarly, dude.
So yeah, it was an experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. You said you've done it like 3 or 4 times, or?
I've done it 3 times, I believe. Yeah, and it's every time I do it, I'm like, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, for sure, man.
It's for one, it's the most I don't know. You just lactic acid. You trying to put in beer in when you're hyperventilating is something that is near impossible.
Well, and the elevation increase has got to mess something up too, doesn't it? So you got all kinds of factors.
That messes up carbonation. There's probably more carbonation. You're shaking up the beers as you're carrying them up. Yeah.
Interesting, man. Interesting. Okay, so
that's more of a novelty.
No, it's good, man. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So something else from your introduction that I kind of want to touch on is the word perfectionist. As you describe yourself as a perfectionist, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means doing everything perfect, which you probably never happens. Right. And then perfect is an arbitrary term. It's like, what do you consider perfect? The world record in the 10,000 meters on the track? Like, no, it can be run faster. So things are never perfect. But at this point in my life, I think it's more of a hindrance than it is a benefit. Right. Because if I'm not doing things up to my standard, I don't get them done. And it's, not getting done. No one will ever know that you're not getting 60% of the things that you want to get done in life. It's only internal, but I think I am my own worst enemy when it comes to perfectionism, I feel.
Do you feel that this perfectionist mentality can be a weight that kind of weighs you down at times in your life?
Yeah, most of the time. But it also is what gets you out there to train every day and to be the best athlete that you can be.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword then.
Yes. Okay. One edge is much sharper and more broad at the moment.
So now that you've been going through this tough time in your life with the injury and things of that nature, do you find that perfectionism and that weight in your life is weighing you down like even more?
Yes.
Because you are not able to be the Peter of old or the Peter of past, or being able to do what you were able to do in the past at the level you were able to do it. So is that perfectionism does it kind of eat at you and just kind of weigh you down and hold you down even more?
Yes.
Now that you are going through some of these struggles and these, maybe if you want to call it, maybe some darker times, being removed from your sport?
Yeah, I think it weighs heavily, very heavily, every single thing I do.
Right.
But I feel like when I'm running and training at a higher level, injury-free, it's almost a gift, because then everything else I do is better in life.
Right.
So it's also motivation. I mean, motivation and perfectionism, I think, are intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm doing well, I'm feeling good physically, that means I'll feel good mentally, emotionally, and when I'm not, it seems the opposite.
Right.
Yeah, so it is, you're right, it's a heavy burden. I think it's even amplified when things aren't going well.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this word perfectionist, because I know when we talked a few minutes beforehand, before we started the podcast, I said I was going to ask you about being a perfectionist and kind of what that means to you, because when I was younger, I considered myself a perfectionist, and it was such a heavy burden and weight in my life. I really believe it was kind of a catalyst for me at a younger age, and for the most part throughout all of my 20s, of struggling with anxiety and just trying to be this person that is unattainable, because I personally believe that there's nothing in this world that is perfect. So when I kind of came to that conclusion, like, hey, Quentin, all you can do is the best that you can with what you have and the circumstances and the situation that you're in. And once I kind of let go of being a perfectionist and that perfectionism, it really kind of opened up the door for me just to be a lot more mellow and chill, not get too high, not get too low, but just go with the flow. And I've been going through a transition in my life, Peter, over the last, I'd say, couple years of just like coming out of that anxiety and coming out of that perfectionism and being just so bound up and so uptight and feeling like, I mean, there was times, Peter, when I was in college where I didn't want to get out of bed because the anxiety was so strong in my life. And after I was done playing sports, I mean, I was always lifting weights since I was in the fourth grade. And so lifting weights was always a part of my life. Sometimes it was my whole life. Sometimes it was just a little bit of my life training for football or sports or athletics. But after football, I just dove headlong into bodybuilding and lifting weights, and that was everything. So I would get so nervous before I went to the gym, because I inside I had to do things. I had to lift the weights, that I did last time. I had to get one more rep, and this kind of this perfectionism just ate at me, and it caused me just to, just be so anxious, to the point where it's like I'm laying in my dorm room in my bed, and I was so just gripped that I didn't want to face the day, because it was I knew that I had to go. That's how I spoke mentally or inside of my mind. Like, I have to go work out today. Today's leg day, and I know it's going to be hard. I know what I have to put my body through, and it was a really dark time in my life, and I struggled with that from, I'd say, probably because I used to be a really big runner when I was younger, 1,600, 800 and stuff, and I have to go run before school, and I have to do all of this stuff, and it was just like that perfectionism, always striving for more and more and more, where it's just like it just kind of turned into that anxiety. So that's why I just kind of wanted to, touch on that a little bit with you, because I just feel like, even though this is the second time we've met, and the first time was just kind of in passing, we have a lot of similarities,
right.
Even though you're a professional athlete and I'm not, but, just some of the other things that we talked about beforehand, where it's like, I get you in a sense, you know what I mean? Kind of what you're going through right now, and some of these words that you use to describe yourself, I have or do use to describe myself as well, so yeah. I just kind of wanted to give that context to the listeners and for you as well. That's why I'm kind of picking at that perfectionist word a little bit, you know what
right.
I mean? So,
yeah, no, I don't. First of all, I don't think I don't consider myself a professional athlete.
Okay.
But I guess if you have sponsors and you get race entries and get
I consider you a professional athlete.
All right.
Is that cool?
Yeah, that's good. I will not. You can.
Yeah. No, that's completely cool.
But I I do a lot of other things, so I don't rely on running. I would like to, but I don't rely on running as a major source of income.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I definitely would, but I would need to be a lot faster.
Right.
And there's athletes that can do that, and more power to them. I think that's amazing. When you find something that you really love, and then you can make money from it. There's not a lot of people that get to do that.
Right,
People go and sit in a cubicle and are miserable for 8 hours a day, and they do it for 50 years of their life, or go work in a factory. There's some satisfaction. And looking back on hard work is like, oh yeah, in retrospect, I'm glad I did that. But during, it's like, why am I doing this?
Right.
This is not making me happy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it that aside, being considered professional, I agree with your definition of being a perfectionist. For me, it was more of it is like getting up and like, oh, I'm going to run. If I have a group to run with, then I'll just meet them and things happen. That's sort of external motivation. The internal motivation, I always knew that I would run. I ran every day. I always knew that I was going to run, but that doesn't mean the anxiety wasn't there. Like, when am I going to do it? I'm not motivated to do it right now. I just knew I was going to do it, so that sort of quelled my anxiety a bit.
So would you consider yourself somebody that struggles with anxiety and just kind of like that nervousness of like, man, it's like,
I don't,
or not necessarily?
Yes, in recent years I've realized, wow, maybe I am more anxious, or nervousness. I don't know if I'd call it anxiety, but yes, nervousness, not being able to face it, like being overwhelmed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess that's all anxiety based on DSM definition.
And has the anxiousness or the nervousness, however, whatever word you specifically, Peter, would like to use to describe it, do you feel like that has increased during this time of not being able to run like you would like to, or not necessarily?
Tenfold. Yeah, it's gotten bad. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, not when I'm going to run, is if I'm ever going to run again. Right. And
does that scare you then, that the possibility may be out there that you could never reach the level that you've previously been at?
I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. I'm not getting any younger. I just turned 40, and not to say I don't have a lot of time, but I can still be very competitive for, I have friends that have run well into their 50s.
Absolutely.
And at a really high level. I'm not just saying, placing in your age group. I'm talking about winning races. And yes, that is a possibility, but I need to be able to run to do that. So I need to be injury free, and I'm not.
Right.
I'm not doing any of those things right now. Mm-hmm. So time is not on my side.
Time just does not slow down for anybody.
No.
I'll be 32 in July, and I had a conversation with my mom over the break, and we were always talking about time. Just the older you get, the faster it goes, and it doesn't slow down for anybody. And that's why we've got to take advantage of every minute that we have, because it's time is money. To me, time is very valuable, and how we use our time during our stay here on this earth is it can we can use that time positively or negatively, and
yeah, I agree with that.
It speaks a lot in regards to who you are, in regards to how you use your time, so. But all right, so let's talk about you being a free spirit and a wanderlust, which I feel like those two words, because those two words, free spirit and wanderlust, are two words that I use to describe myself personally.
Yeah.
I would not consider myself a tree hugger, but I feel like a free spirit and a wanderlust those two words could tie in pretty closely with tree hugger. Would you agree with that, or?
Yes, I think because if you're wanderlust to me means you're traveling without being concerned about where you're going necessarily, and I've driven across the U.S. numerous times, and just it's nice when I don't have a timeline because I see something that I want to go do, and oh wow, I'll just do that. Nora, my wife, is the total opposite. She likes to be on time. I'm always late. She needs plans. I don't do well with plans. I don't do well with planning, I should say. If it's done for me, that definitely helps me out. But I think they are, when you do experience a lot of new places and maybe you get there organically, you start to appreciate nature and the environment and people more. So it's not necessarily just nature, but you're meeting people if you're traveling, and you're free-spirited about how you travel. You know, you don't care about who you meet. Just when you meet interesting people, they're interesting people. Not, oh, I want to meet these type of people, so I'm going to go here to do that. That's sort of limiting your life experience. You know, like you said before we started, if you're doing a podcast on me just as a runner and I just talk about running, you know, that is my identity, but we're not talking about the other things that are important to me. So I think, I think they would intertwine nicely. Tree hugger,
wanderlust, free spirit.
Yeah,
because whenever I think of a hippie, and I personally don't consider myself a hippie. I don't consider myself a tree hugger, but I do consider myself a free spirit and a wanderlust. But whenever I think of a hippie, the image that pops in my mind is somebody who is just they're a free spirit. And usually, from my understanding and knowing about hippies, whether it's the ones from the 60s or the 70s or current day hippies, they are open to traveling and moving. There's no really urgency of really anything. It says like, hey, I'm gonna wake up today, I'm gonna go with the flow, and peace, love, and let's try to make the place that we're living better. So that's kind of those are just a few things that pop in my head. And I always want to be respectful in how I use words to describe people, or because we all have preconceived notions, or we have prejudices. We all do. I don't care who you are, where you're from. We all have prejudices. We all have preconceived notions. So, like, the whole, because the word hippie can be used negatively. I've heard that word used to describe people negatively, but I usually, when I hear the word hippie or anything of that nature, it has more of a positive connotation for me. So I always want to be respectful when I use the word hippie or describe somebody as a hippie or anything of that nature, because it can get kind of dicey with words in our PC world that we live in.
It's how you interpret it, and I think it's definitely open to interpretation. And when I say it, I know what it means to me.
Right, exactly.
But the other person or other people may not know unless you explain it.
Right, yeah.
But yes, I think hippie's it's a fun word.
I love it, man. I do. I'm not a hippie. I know I'm not, but the free spirit and the wanderlust I am, and it's just cool, man. They all three of those kind of, I think, intertwine and are connected on some level, and go good together. So
you're gonna grow your hair out and grow a beard, and then you're gonna become.
I can't grow the beard. I can't, not like you, but 3 years I let my hair grow. I mean, and my hair is super. I actually just got a haircut today, so you can't see the curls. But when I let my hair grow, I mean, it's really wavy, really curly. 3 years. It was almost 3 years. I think it was like a month away from 3 years. But I let it grow out, dude. I let my beard grow out as much as I could. But had the ponytail, not the man bun or anything crazy like that. My straight up ponytail. But then I let it out. It was just big, bushy. A lot of people, thought I looked like Jesus and stuff, which is cool with me. But So I've been there, man. So I was in my 20s and stuff. So now being a school teacher and things of that nature, and I've already got a half sleeve hand tattoos. So I try to be a little bit more dialed in on that end. But yep, I've been there. I've done it.
Yeah,
so.
That's only physical appearance.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot more to it.
There it is. Yeah, cool. All right, so let's. You mentioned earlier that you grew up in Southern California.
Yes.
And did you go to college then out in Southern California?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I went to college in my hometown of Whittier.
Okay, cool.
Whittier College.
Okay.
Yeah, small Division III liberal arts college.
Yep, I went to Division III. That's where I played football. Liberal arts college in Iowa. Then I quit football and transferred to the University of Sioux Falls, which is also, it's not Division III. It was NAIA at the time, but a liberal arts school.
Right.
So I've kind of had that liberal arts education, which a lot of people that are familiar with college, they think of like the big universities, like, University of Colorado Boulder or Colorado State or something of that. There's definitely a uniqueness to a liberal arts education. So did you kind of find that? Did you enjoy that liberal arts?
Yeah, I really did.
Or?
I since my school was so small, I think we had 1,200 undergrad. It was tiny. High school might have been larger, and I remember being in classes where there was 5 people, and if you didn't do your work, you got called on. It's
I got emailed.
You can't hide. If you're in a huge 400-person hall and you can sleep and get through it, but you're almost forced to learn, which sometimes college students need.
Yep.
I'd like to say a lot of college students are motivated, but sometimes really we're not.
Right.
We're tired and stayed up too late.
Yeah. Drinking too much beer and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, luckily the palate has evolved since the college days.
Right.
But yeah.
So what did you study in college? Because then, if I remember correctly, you mentioned you came out to Colorado Springs to start something at the Olympic Training Center. So did that tie in to your degree then? Or?
It did. I guess my degree, my general degree was called Physical Education and Recreation.
Okay, cool.
The emphasis was on athletic administration.
Okay.
So I got an internship at the the first one was USA Triathlon.
Okay, cool.
And so I came out to Colorado Springs, lived at the Olympic Training Center, and I loved it so much that I applied for a second internship, and the director said, "Oh, we don't usually do this, but, all right, go ahead, you can have a second one."
Awesome.
I was paid, I don't know, $2 an hour or something.
Sounds like an internship.
Yeah, it was an internship.
Hey, at least you got paid, because a lot of times they're unpaid internships. So.
I did get housing at the Olympic Training Center,
cool.
so I did get to eat with Olympians and met some amazing people there. So all of that was covered. I did have a little spending money. But yeah, that's what brought me out here, just that emphasis on I wanted to be involved with the Olympic movement.
Absolutely.
And I spent about 2 years in the Springs.
Cool.
And then the Wanderlust happened, and I traveled around, lived in Wilmington, North Carolina for about 9 months. I applied and got into graduate school in Springfield, Massachusetts, at Springfield College, which is the first YMCA school. It was where basketball was invented. So there was a rich heritage there of specific sports, athletic-related majors. It wasn't just, you're in athletic administration. We had an athletic administration as well as a sports management, as well as there was other facets which other schools just sort of lumped all together.
It's one of because my bachelor's degree is in exercise science. I'm actually currently a physical education teacher. Mm-hmm. From my understanding, that's like one of the most premier colleges in the country for like exercise science and all that, isn't it? I mean, because I've come across that college and I've looked at getting my master's degree and just different exercise science kinesiology. That college pops up often, so it's pretty legit if you're interested in exercise science and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I felt like it was the gold standard.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Of that type of anything exercise, athletic related. It was a great experience. I learned a lot.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say it was undergrad too. I just feel like Whittier College was, and you don't appreciate things at the time always, but if I went to a UC system school, I applied to UCLA and USC and some of those big schools that are prestigious, and you think that you need to, if you get into those, you've made it in life. I think I would have been lost in a classroom of 2,000 students, and the way for me to learn is to interact and to ask questions, and to have more of that one-on-one experience rather than just listening to someone preach and then you go and do your work.
Yeah. Well, if you're involved in any type of exercise, it's you have to be practical. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me. I personally feel like, and this is nothing against my professors, nothing against the University of Sioux Falls where I graduated with my bachelor's degree in exercise science, but I really feel, Peter, that the 4 years I spent getting that exercise science degree, for the most part, was 4 years of wasted education. I mean, I've spoken to my mom. She's my best friend. That's why she keeps kind of popping up in this conversation. But there's been a lot of times where I've told my mom, like, Mom, there's not one thing from my exercise science classes that I really remember that I actually learned, like, oh, wow, I'm applying this now to my life. A lot of it was stuff that I already knew, or I've learned after I graduated, just continuing to try to, have that fire to continue to learn.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm right with you where it's like, how valuable is a college degree? It depends kind of where you're going. I know for me with the exercise science, it hasn't been that valuable. I mean, being the teacher right now, it's really the only time, in my 31 years that degree's kind of come through for me to say, hey, if I didn't have this degree, I wouldn't have been able to be a PE teacher right now. Otherwise, I've been working, delivering pizzas, working at halfway houses, kind of just trying to make ends meet because I had the student loans and stuff,
Right.
But without the application component of any type of exercise degree, I mean, because there was kids I know that I got F's on tests, F's on quizzes. I mean, I graduated with a 3.2, but I failed a lot of tests and quizzes. I'm talking about within exercise science classes, and wasn't the best student. But there was kids that got 4.0s and all of that type of stuff. Take them into the weight room, tell them, hey, construct a exercise program. Here's the parameters, all that. They couldn't do the application part.
Right.
I just failed the test, but I can go into the gym and you give me these parameters and I can do whatever you ask me to do. Not all the time, but on a better level, just in regards to application. And so that's where it was just like, hey, dude, you can get a 4.0 in all these exercise science classes, but can you apply it?
Right.
Because if you can't apply what you're learning, if you can't apply that knowledge, the knowledge is dead. There's no value to it.
I agree with that. I think real world terms are better than acing tests.
Right. Yeah.
When you can apply something in the real world, and that's what we learn after we get out of school.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, I just paid $50,000 in loans, trying to pay those back.
Right.
Because I had this degree. And yes, the degree does get you your foot in the door.
It does. Yep.
Which is nice, but I think we should rethink the way we educate.
Yep.
And
being a school teacher, I'm seeing it firsthand where it's like something's got to give here in our country with education, not just the physical education. But I'm talking math, science, everything. There's something that's got to give.
That being said, I think that the physical education part of it is important, and all the physical education courses and hours are being cut now.
Yep.
One, because we have a miserable, someone who just cares about money, not about really helping children,
right.
in my opinion. But if you have a hyperactive student in class and they haven't been able to vent in some way, they're not going to learn. And I just feel much better when I'm active.
Absolutely.
My mind's clearer. I feel good about myself. That's why the last, I don't know, well, it's been more than 4 months since the surgery, but year and a half, 2 years, I was still active. I was still able to run, but not the way I wanted. Mm-hmm. I've noticed when that slows down or stops, I don't know how sedentary people make it in the world. Right. It's a horrible feeling.
Mm-hmm. Well, and science. You're gonna get me fired up here because this is my passion, man. Is fitness and youth, and just being on the front lines, being at school, man, and the physical fitness. It's crazy, but it's just science proves exactly what you just said, Peter. Like you said, I feel better after working out or during the workout. I mean, science says like when you're exercising, after you're exercising, the endorphins are released. I mean, there's all these chemical reactions that happen through physical movement. Right. And I firmly believe that we were created, however you want to word it, to move. We weren't created to just sit and veg out. We're made to move. Right. And we've got kids that literally we're trying to have them learn 6-7 hours a day, and there's no movement. Their only movement is to the lunchroom to eat unhealthy food. I'll say that, and then move to the next class, and that's it. And it's like, dude, science clearly states that all of these chemical reactions, all of these hormonal reactions, all these positive things happen through movement, through that physical movement. And like the studies and the research make it so clear, like the learning explodes after physical movement. That's why, you have these progressive schools that are, every 15 minutes they get the kids stand up and they're doing different, not necessarily like jumping jacks, but just movement. Right. So I'm right with you, man. Like it's the science and the research is so clear. Like kids need movement, adults need movement. It's medicine.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of politicians, I'll just say it, questioning science or downplaying it. Mm-hmm. They know, but
of course they do.
Money or power is more important to them.
Yeah.
And that's really sad. I think that's going to have a lot of long-lasting effects later in our future.
Absolutely. And we're already seeing the effects of that because of the obesity epidemic we have in our country. We have children that have diabetes that only adults in their 70s and 80s had, and they're 3, 4, 5 years old. Peter, it's heartbreaking to me because I'm on the front lines. I see it every day. We have a snack break at our school for our older kids because I'm middle school, high school, and I see kids. These big Monster energy drinks, slamming down pot. They're throwing down candy, and it's like, and a lot of these kids are already on medication because of hyperactivity and all that stuff, which that's a whole another story I'm not going to get into. And then they're just pounding down all this sugar and stuff, and then they're not moving. It's just like we're seeing it. We're seeing our country over the last 20, 30 years. Of some of those poor decisions of people in office of cutting out physical education, cutting out recess and all the movement. It's heartbreaking, man, because and then all the billions of dollars that go to like the healthcare and medicine and stuff in our country. And then now another thing is like the addiction to the painkillers and the opiates and all this over-the-counter prescription medication, and that's going from the adults, and then the teenagers are getting their hands on it, and it's just, it's just like a domino effect, So I'm with you, man. So did you get your master's degree then at
I did at Springfield College.
Okay, what's your master's?
Athletic administration.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of just expounded on. So didn't you say your undergraduate had a focus or concentration on?
Yeah, athletic administration.
Okay, and then you just went on and got deeper into that. Okay.
Yeah, so the undergrad was basically, you're doing all your standard core classes and, maybe halfway through college, I decided, okay, this is going to be my major.
Yeah.
And so it was just Springfield College was just building on what I did at Whittier College.
Cool. So after getting your master's degree, where did the wanderlust inside of you take you after that, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, immediately after, it took me to Europe.
Okay, cool.
I didn't have a job, and I did rack up a lot of student debt. But I went and traveled Europe with I believe that was with my mother for 6 weeks.
Cool.
Yeah, we just said, let's go to Europe.
Sweet.
So we went and visited family. My mother's Italian. Went and visited some of her family, stayed with them, and then that's where the wanderlust and the free spirit came. Did side trips to I'm going to go to Spain, or I'm going to go to Scotland, and sometimes my mom came. Other times she's like, no, I'm too old for that. You're going to stay up late and do things that I don't necessarily want to do. I went and traveled for several weeks, came back, and then realized I didn't have a job, and slept on people's couches, stayed at my old roommates where I wasn't really living anymore, and then I went out to Boston and stayed with a high school friend for a while until I got my own place and worked at a YMCA in Brighton.
Okay.
And was there for about 9 months, met Nora.
Is that your wife?
She was my wife now, yes.
Sweet.
And then we went and traveled. We were going to travel again for 2 months or so, and that was sort of, it got longer every time I went and traveled. And we ended up being gone for 8.5 months.
Wow.
Yeah, backpacking.
Now, is this world travel or just stateside?
This was mostly Europe.
Okay.
So we visited 19 countries in Europe.
Wow.
Scandinavia, went to Norway, Finland, went down to Egypt when it got cold. We were there we were in Egypt for maybe 2.5 months. It was just, you can live with 2 people, $10 a day.
Wow.
That's food, that's housing, depending on where you were. We did work at a hostel in Estonia for a while. We also worked at a bar on the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, and so that made us a little money. It's a Muslim country, so they're not into drinking. They don't know how to mix drinks, and we were like, we've never done this, but we can add lime and mash some things and
figure it out, right?
Throw really bad alcohol into drinks. Yeah, for the Westerners that came there. Yeah. We were there for, it was warm. We lived right on the beach on a little hut, and but we went basically just traveled to the next place that we saw. Oh, we heard Slovakia is nice, and then we heard let's go to Edinburgh, Scotland. Places that we just had heard of, and then or met people, and they said, "Oh, you need to go here." Right. So we went.
That's cool. Now, how did you get to all these places? Did you kind of like?
This was all backpacking, so this is where the hippie part comes in.
Okay, explain.
It's like living out of a backpack. Buses, trains. We did fly a few times because there's budget airlines there that you can get somewhere for 50 euros, which was nice. It's cheaper than getting on a bus.
Right.
But, for example, we were in Estonia and it started snowing, and I did not own shoes, closed-toed shoes. I had some sandals some Teva sandals that I was wearing, and I had to put like wool socks and then wear the sandals, so it looked a little silly. And that's when we realized we have to go somewhere warm, because I guess I could have bought shoes, but we wanted to go somewhere warm.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So then we got it was probably a $70 flight to Egypt.
Wow.
And that's a long, that you try to get from Oregon to Texas, Oregon to Florida. I don't know I think it's a long way. I don't know the exact mileage, but it's nice when you can say, I want to get all the way over there on
$70 or whatever. Yeah, because in
money.
The States that'd probably be Oregon to Florida. That'd be, I don't know what, 400, 500.
Yeah. Unless you went on like Spirit Airlines, and then you may never make it there because they're never on time.
I've never flown them, but
sorry for that bad plug, Spirit, but
it's all good, man. Yeah. It's all good. So we've been going for over an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time, and so I'm just gonna try to wrap things up here a little bit. So that's the goal of the 127 Fit podcast, kind of like we talked about before we turned on the mic, is yes, you're a runner. You've been a high-level runner. That's been a big part of your life, but I always want to try to dig a little bit deeper, and I feel like we really have. I feel like we've had a really good conversation outside of just kind of the running thing, which a lot of people might know Peter as the runner or whatever. But like you said earlier, it's important to be more than just one thing. It's important to be well-rounded, and I feel like we've really peeled back some layers and found out a little bit more about you and some of your other interests, which is cool. Kind of wrapping things up and closing, though, I kind of do want to go back to the mountain runner, being a runner, because that has been and it's going to be a big part of your life. So if you don't mind just kind of sharing with myself and the listeners, Peter, how did you get into running? Is it something that you started when you were really young, and just kind of share, however long you want, kind of the genesis of running and how you got to be, a sponsored athlete and traveling the world as a runner, because that's pretty cool if you ask me. And I know, talking to another member here at the Y, we were just small talking, and I mentioned to her that I couldn't remember your name, and I was like, it was when I was working and I was taking her through some of the new equipment that we have here.
People always recognize me by physical appearance.
She knew you. I was like, I kind of went up to this guy, and I just noticed he had running shoes on. We kind of struck up a conversation, and we added each other on Instagram, and I was like, I can't remember his name right now. And she knew you because she has just gotten this last year. She had some goals to run some ultra marathons, and she accomplished those goals. But she knew you, so people know you as a runner. That's a big part of your life. So, right. Just explain a little bit about kind of that genesis and how you became the runner that you are. And how that's become such a big part of your life, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, part of it was not being allowed to play certain sports because I was such a scrawny little kid. Okay. My mother would not let me play football or sports that were popular, that my friends were playing, because she thought I'd get hurt, and which was probably true. I was in 5th, 6th grade. I was probably 50 pounds, 60 pounds. And then didn't progress too much after that. I did wrestle in high school, and I remember wrestling the 103 weight category, and the first year I wrestled, I was like 98 pounds. So I was like, everyone's cutting weight. I was like, I can eat what I want, and I'm not stressed out about this. And Innovate is one of my sponsors. They did basically a story on this exact thing, how I got into it, how I became a runner, and they just asked me questions, had me talk. It wasn't really a Q&A, it was just they had me talk, and then that makes you really think about it. Absolutely. And I remember this. It was a physical education class, and we were doing this challenge between periods in our class, and it was 5th grade, and we had the mile, so it was like a field day type thing. We had the mile run, and I finished first for my class. I remember running about 7 minutes and 22 seconds or something, and it was a huge accomplishment. Right. It was like everyone was like, "Oh, you ran so fast," and getting the praise, and you feel good when you get that praise. And then there was this one kid, who was a really talented athlete. Damon Tristan was his name. he was in another period and he ran a second faster than me. And I remember just that stoking the competitive spirits in me. And my mother not allowing me to play football when my friends were doing it. I realized that I did a few of those classes, PE classes, where I found I was good at running. It was like, yeah, this is really difficult. No one likes doing this, but then when you're good at it, you're like, oh, I may like it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it started.
Cool.
I have 5th grade, 6th grade, and then went into middle school and did we had the 25-mile club, they called it. It was you just run as many laps as you could for the period, and you try to accumulate 25 miles. And I remember being the first to finish that, and I think I did way more than 25 miles. And it was just, I didn't know it at the time, but I was good at it, and I accomplished something. I motivated myself, but it was really difficult. Running is a really difficult thing on the body, physically, mentally, emotionally. So that's basically how it started for me. Then cross country in high school, track, and I just started winning races and thought, wow, I like this. I'm good at it. And then I remember getting into mountain running. My college coach took us to a race called Mount Baldy. It was out in the San Bernardino Mountains, and probably 45 minutes, an hour drive from Whittier, from the coast. And he said, we're doing it as a training run. And so we started at about 6,200 feet, climbed to 10,064 feet. That's where the race finished, right at the top of this peak. And I was 6th overall in the race, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I thought, I'm never doing that again. But I felt good about the accomplishment and beating athletes that were older than me and well-trained and really focused on that type of running. So that's what really stoked the mountain running passion. And then after that, it's, as they say, it's history.
Yeah. So did you when you were going to get your undergraduate, did you run?
I did at Whittier College. Yes.
Stuff? Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Cross country and track, and we had a really good team. My teammates were really motivated. I feel like sometimes, I've learned that over time, that if you have a team that's not, if they're going to practice just to practice, they're not doing anything above and beyond, like talking about really interested in racing and training outside of that, then you're not going to have an accomplished team.
Right.
And I've learned years later that, we had a really good team. We were really motivated. We screwed around a lot, but we never skimped on workouts, and we ran as hard as we could and pushed each other, sometimes a little too hard, but we were, I think that's what helped to motivate me.
Right. So you ran in college, and then you came up to Colorado Springs for your couple years. You did your internship at the Olympic Training Center. Throughout all of that time, and then your world travels and all that, was running always a part of your life throughout all of that time then? Up to
it
this
was.
point?
Yeah, when I came out here, I was training a little too hard for the internship, and I got a stress fracture.
Okay.
And so I was pretty miserable for a few months there. Kept re-injuring it, or thought I re-injured it, and it basically was a bunch of scar tissue that had developed, and it felt like there was still a broken bone or fractured bone. And so luckily I got some help through that, and then the mountains, like I said, the trails here are incredible. Best in the world. You can get up to 14,000 feet in a matter of 13 miles.
Right.
You can train really fast and stay on gravel. You can do almost anything right in the Pikes Peak region.
Right. Yeah, so do you consider trail running your favorite type of running?
Yeah, again, trail running, mountain running, ultra running is pretty specific because it's above a marathon distance.
Right.
But yeah, they're sort of all intermingled. Yeah, I would say mountain running. I mean, it makes you think of big things to run up rather than trails can be, we have the Santa Fe Trail right out here, which is pretty flat. That's considered trail running, but I prefer to do that on single track and up big mountains. So yeah, I would consider myself a mountain runner.
Cool. Yeah, I just let me see, back in March, I did a 10K. It was a trail run here in Colorado Springs. It was the first time, not the first time I've ever done a trail run, but the first time I've done one in a long time. And then I did my first half marathon back in Iowa when I lived there for a month and a half over school summer break. And the half marathon, it was just basically on running around a big loop of a lake. But it was just like, it was on asphalt, it was on the road and some rock road. But I will probably never, ever, ever, ever again run a half marathon, because the longest I'd ever run before that without stopping was like, I think 7 or 8 miles. Okay. But I just kind of wanted to prove to myself that I could do the half marathon.
But if you do the Pikes Peak Ascent,
I just don't want to ever run on. If I ever do a half marathon, it's not going to be on asphalt and just in a big loop, because dude, it's just boring. So what I was trying to say is, like, when I did that 10K, the off-road trail thing, so much more enjoyable. Like, there was there's some deer, and it's just like the trees. And like the beauty out here in Colorado, and this area is just unbelievable. So it's just like, I can agree with you 100%. Like the mountain running, the trail running, just kind of the off-road, I guess you could say, running is just, for me, and it sounds like for you too, is a lot more enjoyable than just like running in a loop or running on a track. Because, dude, it was just 13.1 miles of just being bored, man. I don't listen to music or nothing, because I try to just stay focused in my own mind or whatever. But just it's boring, man. Like, oh.
Yeah, I agree. I would say being out in the mountains or on the trails is sort of spiritual for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, how did you get from kind of just the high school running, college running, to then becoming a part of, because correct me if I'm wrong, you've been a part of some Team USA trail running teams, and you have sponsors specifically for your running.
Yes.
How did that genesis or that transformation take place? Was it just kind of knowing the right people, or was it because of specific performances, times that you ran?
I think that was just who I was around at the time. When I went to, I started, because of the mountains here, I started getting in the trails and doing some trail races in Colorado. And then when I went to Springfield College, I got onto a team called the Central Mass Striders. Okay. And we had a really good team and focused on trails and mountain running. And I think that was a bigger motivator. Okay. And I was hanging around with people who had sponsors, and I was like, oh, I should think about that. Yeah. That means you have to run some fast races and be competitive. Mm-hmm. So I was just in that group, and luckily it was a positive, enriching group where it's like, we're a good team. We like doing this. Let's do it all together. Sweet. Yeah. Beat some people. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's where it really started. Then I got a sponsorship with La Sportiva. And, from there I was like, oh, wow, I can not make a living, but I can satisfy my needs through running. Yeah. That means shoes, that means clothing, that means some travel stipend, that means some race entries.
Cool.
So, yeah, and then it evolved from there.
Sweet. What's the longest distance you've run without stopping?
Well, I've raced 47 miles, 78 kilometers. That was in the Midi-Pyrenees region in France. That was a race called Le Templier that I mentioned earlier. And I've done that twice. Cool. And I don't know if I'd say without stopping, because you have to get some food at aid stations. But
right.
yeah, I would say no more stopping than 20
Bathroom
seconds,
break or
30
something
seconds.
like that,
I pee on the run.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
I've done it. I mean, I didn't do it much before that, but I was like, oh yeah, you can do this. No one's around. It's much easier when you're a male.
Right. Yeah, I would think so.
I can imagine.
Uh-huh.
But so that is the longest that I've raced and run.
Cool.
Yeah, I've done some longer training runs leading up to that, 30, 35 mile realm. I've done quite a few 50K races.
Cool. And that's how many miles?
That is 31 miles.
31 miles,
yes.
Okay, cool. So is there a runner that has been motivating for you, or kind of like somebody that you kind of look up to? I know like Steve Prefontaine has been kind of like that.
Yeah.
We mentioned in the past with the Manitou Incline, kind of that cult following of the Manitou, and I know I read a book in regards to his coach, Steve Prefontaine's coach, back at the University of Oregon, and a big chunk of it talked about Steve, but I mean, there's still a cult following of Steve Prefontaine.
There is.
So is there somebody like him, or is it him, or somebody else that maybe?
Yeah, back in high school, I'd say it was definitely Steve Prefontaine.
Steve, yeah, cool.
He leaves a legacy of just
Absolutely.
running with heart and grit, and as he mentioned many times, he did not have the physique of a runner,
Right.
which there's now we see a lot of different physiques, not just the really skinny, lanky runners, but he was definitely. I had Steve Prefontaine posters in my dorm room in college, and then once I started getting into the mountain running, there was definitely a lot more. One person in particular that I remember was when I did Mount Baldy. I think it was the first time I did it. Jeremy Wright was his name, and I met him. He won the race that day. He came close to the course record, and after that he was on a few U.S. mountain running teams, and I officially met him at the Olympic Training Center.
Okay.
And he was dating a triathlete there, and he was sort of what I wanted to emulate. Seeing him win a race and then go and do well in snowshoes and win the Pikes Peak Ascent. I thought, wow, he's well-rounded. He's a really nice guy. He's approachable, and then he had a sad story. He was killed by an IED in Afghanistan, 2005. And Green Beret. He was a brilliant person, but an amazing athlete. Most of all, I think just a good person, good human being. Mm-hmm. So that was really motivating. That he was sort of someone I idolized. And current day, I try to stay away from idols because it can be a dangerous thing.
Absolutely.
To try to be like someone,
I hear you.
but there's definitely people that I see, and I want to be like them in some aspect. I want to do that. I want to travel more. I want to, do some humanitarian things, and so I think taking a little bit of what people are doing and making it your own is how you become you.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about the world we live in. There's all kinds of unique, different, cool people, and it's like if your heart is open to learn, you can learn from anybody. I mean, you can learn positive things, you can learn negative things, but just having that open heart and just being willing to learn from others, I think is really valuable. So that's super super cool. All right, one last thing: nutrition. When you are when you're a competitive athlete, when you're a competitive runner, I'm assuming from what I've researched and heard, you've got to eat a lot.
Yes.
Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Is there a very specific way that you like to eat or that you found fuels you the best way as a runner, as an athlete? Or is it just kind of more of kind of just get the calories in, just do what you got to do to get the energy and stuff?
Well, when you're training at a high level, it's nice that you can just put anything in your body and it'll just it'll burn. I feel like I'm more disciplined with eating healthy, and I consider myself a very healthy eater. I try to avoid meat. I don't eat much of it. Just then you get into ethical part of it, and that's part of it. So mostly plants. I would say plants, grains, things like that. I don't follow any certain diet. I feel like if you want some ice cream and it'll make you happy, then you should have it, because happiness sometimes supersedes that couple ounces you're going to gain in weight. But I try to eat healthy, so a lot of plants. One of my sponsors is Enduro Bites, and they're based here in Colorado Springs, and they're a minimally processed whole food bar. And figs, I think figs are the main ingredient, and I'll see if I have one here. I'll give you one. But I know the owner and founder, and that's part of it. He's always been really supportive, and I meet him for a beer every now and then, and so the nutrition part is part of it, but it's also the connection to the company and to the people that run it. So that the Enduro Bite is sort of what I want. I want whole foods. I want a limited amount of ingredients. I don't want an ingredients list of 40. If you can put some figs and some brown rice syrup, some honey, some cranberries in there.
Good deal. Yeah, cool. Okay, I promise this is the last question. Colorado is known for their outdoors. They're known for their athletics, all that type of stuff. They're running, triathletes, I think, big time in Boulder, all that type of stuff. If somebody is going to come to Colorado and they are a runner or they want to participate in a race, what would be one race? Let's say one ultra race and then one non-ultra race. If you can think of any off the top of your head that you would suggest if somebody was going to come to Colorado to run a race, what would you suggest? Because I know there's races almost probably every weekend you could run in Colorado Springs and Denver and Boulder and all around. So is there maybe one ultra, one non-ultra that you would maybe suggest to the listeners?
Well, people who know me know what I'm going to say for the shorter race. It's the Bar Trail Mountain Race.
Okay, I've heard of it.
And that's one of the first mountain races that I did while living here in the Springs. It's one of the most competitive races I've ever done, and then a few years later I became the race director, and I'm still on the race committee. And it's a small hometown local type of race. We have sponsors that are from the area that support it. We make all the awards by hand. We get a big log, a fallen tree, make cross sections, brand in the BTMR name on there, stick on a amazonite or granite or quartz rock onto it, and those are our awards. Or we have a local potter make some of the awards. So that's close to my heart, just because that's where I met a lot of good people, mountain running friends that I still keep in contact, and then later on becoming involved in the organization part of it. So it's that would be.
Is that here in Colorado Springs? Or
that is in Manitou Springs. Starts at the Cog Railway, climbs up Bar Trail to Bar Camp, turns around, and finishes up Hydro Street. If you're familiar with that, if you're going to the incline, you might know what Hydro Street is. It's a really steep hill. And it's just.
Is it in the fall, spring,
summer?
It
is in this year. It's July 28th.
July 28th,
Sunday, yeah.
2019. Okay.
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's been going on we had to cancel it 1 year because of the Waldo Canyon fire. That was 2012. But it's, I want to say this is the 18th year, if I'm not mistaken.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And then
So,
an ultra race off the top of your head?
ultra race at the top of my head. I mean, Pikes Peak Marathon is not an ultra race, but it feels like an ultra race.
Okay, cool.
You know, it's like running a fast 50K. Yeah, there's just so many. You know, Mad Moose Events puts a lot of great events on in the area. I guess technically I still have the second fastest 50K run in the state of Colorado, and that was at the Greenland 50K.
Sweet.
I did have the fastest for several years, and then Alex Nichols decided to race it, and we ran that race together.
Cool.
And
What's
he
the
ran really
what's
fast.
the ultra race that's like up in northwest? I want to say Colorado. That's like you get a big belt buckle.
That
like-
Hard Rock 100.
No, not that one. What is it? It's like world renowned.
Hard Rock 100 would probably be one of the most prestigious.
Is that the one? Okay. I was trying to think. I thought there was another one that.
It's Colorado. We have a lot of prestigious
I know,
races here.
I know. That's the crazy thing. It's like there's races everywhere. That's why I wanted to ask you, because some of the listeners travel out here or something, hit up some of these races.
Yeah, Leadville 100. You might be thinking of that.
Leadville. Yeah. That's the one that I know. I've heard.
Yeah.
A lot. So okay, there we go. Leadville.
Yeah,
100.
we have so many that
I know, it's crazy, man. Yeah.
They slip your mind.
Well, that's the thing. Like just living in Colorado Springs, like I think literally at least a 5K race you could probably run every weekend. Probably 12 months out of the year. I mean, it's crazy. They've got races.
Yeah. Well, there's a free race here called the Nielsen 2-mile challenge.
I've run that one time, yeah.
Yep, that's the first Saturday of every month.
Yep.
Regardless of the weather. I've been out there where it's been a lot of snow.
Mm-hmm.
I've been out there when it's been right around 0. That's free. That's a nice thing. That's put on by the Pikes Peak Roadrunners.
Yeah.
And you can do a race, I would say, twice a week.
Yeah, I know. It's cool. It's great. So, sweet. Well, thank you, Peter. So I want to give you an opportunity as we are wrapping the podcast up to, I know you've mentioned a couple of your sponsors already, but go ahead, mention any sponsors you want to mention. If somebody would want to reach out to you, if you want to just share your Instagram, social media, any websites, anything like that, the platform is yours to share that.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned some of my sponsors, and I think it's important for what you would say professional athletes to mention their sponsors.
Yeah.
But there is a lot, even if it's not financial, it just having the support, getting the clothing and the shoes. Innovate is my sponsor for that. They also send me around the world and do photo shoots and put my beard into magazines, and that's always nice. It's just, I think, being connected with the sponsor.
Cool.
To me, just having a sponsor to give you money or to give you gear that you may not like it's not what I want. So I prefer to support and have sponsors support me that I believe in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Innovate, it's a mountain trail fell running company based in the UK. Okay. Enduro Bites is based right here in Colorado Springs. They're a nutrition company. They make a beet drink mix as well as the Enduro Bites, and you should check them out. Brian is also a great guy. And Swiftwick Socks, they're a U.S. company based in Tennessee. Okay. In my opinion, the best socks on the market.
Sweet.
They guarantee that.
There you go.
Says it on their packaging.
Cool.
And just recently, I have been in contact with a guy named Brock Cannon for a few months now, and I've been finding out more about CBD.
Yep.
And how, and I think there's a misconception out there of, that's just marijuana. And the more research I did, I was like, wow, this is a natural product that can help with pain relief, inflammation, and I really despise ibuprofen or those chemical agents that they definitely help, but they're made to help, and I feel like you get attached to them, and there's some negative effects. You know, you can destroy your kidneys, and if you're using them in an ultra, and you're like, oh, my legs are swollen. So Prevail Botanicals is the name of the company. They're based in Santa Barbara, California, and CBD products. I think, you know, getting older, there's more aches and pains, and I want a natural way to do it.
Absolutely.
So they're a new sponsor of mine.
Awesome. Yeah. Any like Instagram? You want to give your Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram is just my name, Peter Maksimow.
Okay.
It's difficult to spell, but it's just look for the picture of the big beard.
Cool.
Facebook is Peter Maksimow. Yeah, and then Innovate has done some cool stories and photo shoots with me, and you know, that's all online.
Awesome. Very good.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you, Peter, for taking time today to connect with me. I know it was probably 2 months or something when we first kind of crossed paths.
I think so. I don't know if I did surgery yet.
You were off traveling around and doing your thing, and you said, "Hey, we'll get connected," and it worked out today. So I just want to thank you for your time and kind of sharing a little bit past just the running today.
Yeah,
so
well, Quentin, thank you for having me. These are probably things I wouldn't talk about in public unless I was prodded on. It's you know, what I've been going through lately is just not something that I necessarily want to talk about because it's not positive. It's being injured and with something you do in your everyday life is difficult. So, yeah, thanks for the good questions and the cool descriptors over there.
Yeah, not a problem.
I think those are all me.
For sure. All right. I just want to thank everybody out there, all you listeners, for tuning in again to the 127 Fit podcast. It was an awesome conversation, an awesome guest, and I'm very thankful for Peter's time today. I just want anybody that's tuning in out there to know the 127 Fit podcast has recently been added to iTunes. So you can find the podcast on iTunes. You can also find it on Stitcher, Podbean, and I am going to do my best to get it on some other platforms. The last platform that you can also find it on is Castbox. So it's more than just Podbean. So you no longer have to try to download the app and go through all that rigmarole to try to listen to the podcast. If you've got your smartphone, get your podcast app, and you can find the 127 Fit podcast. Just type that in; it should pop up. Got some new cover art. Got a dude that's pretty jacked, and it says the 127 Fit podcast: Fitness, Thoughts, Life. Black background with some red in there, so you can't miss it. So, however you listen to your podcasts, you can start finding the 127 Fit podcasts in more places. So. Please make sure that you guys like and subscribe and pass on this episode and the other episodes from the 127 Fit podcast. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I know that you guys gain some awesome information, knowledge from Peter and through Peter. And I know that as he kind of shared some things maybe that he said he wouldn't have shared if he wasn't asked today, I know some of you have been impacted and you can relate. And so wherever you're at today, whatever you're going through, just stay positive. We have so many things to be thankful for and grateful for. We all have gifts. And if you're going through some tough times right now as you listen to this, hey, we all have struggles. We've all gone through tough times, or are going through tough times, or will go through tough times. So you're not alone. Reach out to Peter. Reach out to myself. You can find me at 127 Fitness on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook at Quentin Vars. You can find me on YouTube at Quentin Vars. So reach out If there's some guests that you would like to have on the podcast that you know live in the Colorado Springs, Denver, Boulder area, anywhere in Colorado, please let me know. I'm working on some guests in the state, and so I'm looking forward to those interviews upcoming. So shoot Peter a message, shoot me a message. Let us know how you liked or didn't like the conversation today. Give me some feedback. I always want to try to improve and make this podcast the best that I can make it, so that you guys can be positively impacted. With that being said, I'm going to leave you guys with Proverbs 24:10, which states, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small." Until next time, I'll catch you guys later.
And if you sat through that, I